former President Jacob Zuma announced that he would not campaign and vote for the ANC in the upcoming 2024 election. Instead, he called on people to vote for the newly registered uMkhonto weSizwe party, named after the ANC's former military wing that has since been disbanded. Now, this as the country gears up for the general election in 2024, and the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, which is the largest ANC province in terms of numbers, probably hoped to lean on Zuma's popularity to campaign for next year's election. Now, Zuma's announcement follows hot on the heels of a turbulent week for the ANC after Veterans League Deputy President Mavuso Msimang resigned from the organization, only to withdraw his resignation after a meeting with its leaders. Academic and political analyst Professor Susan Booysen, who has written books about the ANC, including Dominance and Decline, the ANC in the Time of Zuma, joins us now virtually to discuss these matters. Professor Booysen, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina.
First and foremost, it's been such a crazy busy week for the African National Congress, with many of the senior members, actually making very serious moves within the party. What do you make of all of this?
Sakina, this is an interesting, complex move that we saw primarily here from Jacob Zuma in this last few days, where he really takes this situation of the ANC being in a relatively weak position, weaker than it has ever been since 1994 in democratic electoral times, and combine that with the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa has been criticized and indeed can be said in many respects not to be giving strong leadership. It's in a context of small political parties flourishing and possibilities of opposition fronts coming about, forms of coalition with a view to forcing the ANC under 50% in power in next year's election. All of these factors are coming together. And in this context, Jacob Zuma really, I would say, played his cards strategically and played them well, to embarrass the ANC and to force the ANC in a further weaker position, while he himself is probably delusional in some of his reconstructions of his victimhood and history of what the damage that he had done to the ANC, definitely not acknowledged in this process. But overall, a calculated, strategic, in some ways a mischievous move, but one that certainly cannot make the ANC feel comfortable, because the ANC is in this almost a life or death battle, electorally life or death battle, for a 50% majority or not. And here we see another instigator in the form of a small party with a high profile now, possibly in future will go into alliances with parties like the ANC and other small registered political parties, and could really counter not just the ANC, but the multi-party charter bloc. And in this context, overall, we possibly see a three-power bloc party, political power bloc situation arising in South Africa.
Before we get into the merits and demerits of this move by former President Jacob Zuma, you say, Prof, that, he is somewhat delusional in some of his assertions of his victimhood. Just explain that to us, please.
Sakina, in his multi-page speech read by his daughter, there was really no acknowledgement whatsoever of the severe damage that he personally had inflicted on the ANC, the extent to which he probably did inherit an ANC in which it was already acknowledged that there was opportunism, careerism, corruption, but he took it all to dramatically new levels. And it was under in his 9-year period of rule as president of South Africa generally, that socioeconomic problems really became entrenched, institutionalized. It was really clear that the ANC was not doing anything sufficient to address it definitively. And all of this gets absolutely not one word of mention in his input. In addition, he made a statement like the July 2021 riots in KwaZulu-Natal were utterly avoidable. It was only avoidable if Jacob Zuma had not had a Congo judgment against him that he should be imprisoned for 15 months because he didn't appear, he refused to appear at Commission of Inquiry. So he was such a huge protagonist in, not the only one, but a huge one, in all of the problems that the ANC has been encountering and the problems that he is talking about now. And there is no recognition of that whatsoever.
So, and it's interesting that you mentioned that July 21st unrest, because as you say, the former president himself, one of the protagonists in what ultimately played out, but was that avoidable? Could the state have done more? Could they have done better to, at the very least, try and limit the damage that happened during that unrest?
Certainly, the state had, and its weak security forces, we know, we've seen that in a report, in Africa report, for example, that more effective interventions should have been planned, should have been implemented. In the end, it was the army that was called in and approximately, not even definitively or effectively, quelled the unrest and brought things under control again. But there was much more that the state could have done to avoid that, and certainly could have avoided more other deaths, although there certainly wasn't a they were not massacred, as Jacob Zuma suggests in his speech.
So getting back to what happened this weekend and the former president stating that he will not be campaigning for the ANC, but obviously lending his support to this newly formed uMkhonto weSizwe party, but remaining a member of the ANC. Now, how does that work, Prof?
It doesn't work, Sakina. It is a deliberate provocation of the ANC, really challenging his party to kick him out. It is a party that really needs Jacob Zuma to campaign for it. We know some ANC leaders, as Zuma also referred to, did approach him to ask whether he will campaign for the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. Zuma remains incredibly valuable and popular, a type of cult following in KwaZulu-Natal province. And the ANC really would have done better, probably, in all probability, have done better if he had been in a campaign mode there, because he carries weight on the ground there. And KwaZulu-Natal is a very populous province, brings in a system of proportional representation electorally, brings in a lot of votes that nationally contributes to the ANC's overall performance. So if he doesn't work for the ANC and actually actively works against the ANC in that province, there is going to be an impact on the percentage that the ANC registers in next year's election. And Zuma knows that, and he plays that, and he plays with taking something emblematic such as the name of uMkhonto weSizwe in politicals. He and his people around him there call it uMkhonto weSizwe Party, registered a few months ago. And so it is in-your-face challenge to the ANC, and knowing that he propels himself into the center of political attention, and that all will frustrate and anger the ANC. Says these are really actions from former President Zuma which demonstrate no love lost, actually active hate and despising of the ANC.
But if the ANC were to follow its own rules and regulations, what should the action be from the party against the former president for what has happened this weekend?
Well, it should straightforward be disciplinary action, to take him to a disciplinary committee and then eventually probably have him expelled, as we saw in the case of Magashule. And so there are disciplinary processes in the ANC, and if the ANC would dare, and I don't think they have much of a choice in there, they would have to either expel Jacob Zuma or just end his membership and say he has expelled himself by joining another political party, even if it is projected as being an extension of ANC. It's none of the sort. It tries to capture the name of this party, of this entity in the ANC for the new party, but it is plain straightforward, just another political party. So it will be very interesting to see how the ANC reacts to this there.
Do they have much of a choice in how they react? Because there would be many within and outside the ANC watching what the ANC will do. And also, I would imagine how speedily they move to action in this regard, Prof.
Yes, they probably have very, very little choice in this, Sakina, and they would probably have to do it sooner rather than later, because this is a former president, former member, de facto actually former member by now, who really is going to project himself continuously as part of the ANC, as taking the struggle that formerly was via the bullet, now via the ballot, and reforming and rescuing the ANC from outside. It's an inside-outside relationship, and the ANC has frankly not encountered anything like this before. So it will really have to show that it's not fearful of this former president, still a powerful member on the ground, and is prepared to act in terms of enforcing discipline. It is also very important in terms of a attempted clean-up project in the ANC, that it's seen to follow through, because here is a person, by far not the only one, and many of them do remain in the ANC, and I wouldn't be surprised if Zuma challenges on those grounds as well, why action against him and not against many others who have been implicated, for example, in the Zondo Commission. But the ANC would have to act, and even if in this case it is going to lose that traction, lose much of its traction on the ground in the province of KwaZulu-Natal, but it would have to cut its losses and be seen to be acting against Zuma.
But one wouldn't be hard-pressed to assume that the former president does this because he knows that the ANC is probably at its lowest point right now. He knows that this is an organization, going into an election probably for the first time really and truly on the back foot. And by doing this, it brings to mind what Mavuso Msimang said in his resignation, and he has, of course, subsequently rescinded that. But the point that he made was, one of the points at least, was about this unity at all costs within the ANC. So is that something that the ANC will pay particular attention to in trying to decide how to deal with former President Jacob Zuma's latest move?
It will obviously give great attention to that, because the ANC doesn't like losing members. It doesn't like losing people with not all positive, but certainly with gravitas like Jacob Zuma. It would have to be seen to take action, and definitive action, even if they are going to lose and suffer damages on the ground, because the ANC is such a divided, fractioned, and continuously fractioning organization. And they hate taking actions that will drive more people out. But they haven't hesitated to do it in cases or they have hesitated. It's been very prolonged processes if we think how long it took them to ask Ace Magashule, Carl Nias, for what it's worth, even if he hasn't got political traction. It took a long time to get to those points of getting those people out of the party. So the ANC really doesn't like it. It knows in the past it has suffered great losses, although it's now partly reversed in the case of COPE, Congress of the People, in the case of the EFF. So they really try to prevent that, further people exiting and starting competing political projects. But in this case, I really believe they will only have to, there's only one way forward, and that's forward, and that is doing it, and cut the losses and accept that it is probably confirming that it won't get a majority in KwaZulu-Natal and that its national proportions are going to be affected by another few percentage points.
And, the former president also, I think, very smartly invoking the name of another former president, Thabo Mbeki, and saying that he also said that he would find it difficult to go and campaign for the ANC, given what is going on within the party. So almost as if to say, see, I'm not the only one who feels this way about Ramaphosa's ANC. So you look at all of these developments and you have to wonder, these are two leaders with great constituencies within the ANC. And you wonder if they are not throwing their full weight behind the party, how is this going to impact the ANC's fortunes in next year's election? Because this is a problem from within. It's not even, something that concerns other parties outside the ANC.
Yes, Sakina, we really, through all of these pieces of evidence, see much of the crumbling of ANC hegemony. The ANC is just not this behemoth that has ruled over society and political system for such a long time. It is a changed ANC, an ANC that is weaker than ever, and yet still, it is still, and it will in all likelihood still be, the biggest single political party coming out of next year's elections. But it is a watershed, it's a sea change. The difference in how it had performed, even at its weaker points before, and how it's likely to perform in next year's election. It's not just about percentages going down. It's about the esteem in society. It's about the trust in society, the trust in politicians and political system and political parties. And that goes broader than just the ANC. But South African citizens and voters just do not have that general trust anymore. And that actually creates a very dangerous position for multi-party democracy in South Africa. There are so many citizens and voters that are just totally alienated and don't feel they have a stake in the system anymore. It's almost like it's a lumpen democracy, and people just don't see the values that they had to see a continuation of that values of trust that they had in the system before. And so it's really a further crumbling, an internal crumbling of the ANC. ANC, and this is really its own worst enemy. When former presidents, more than just Zuma, comes into the picture and say that, it really casts doubt on the strength of the leadership. And yet, if we look at public opinion polls checking the strength of all leaders, Ramaphosa is still one of the ones that come up with higher percentage of support, even if Mbeki is turning out to be a challenge in those stakes. Citizens and voters do forgive and forget reasonably easily. But that is an internal crumbling, and we could see a elected ANC.
Thank you so much, Professor Susan Booysen, academic and author, also political analyst, discussing some of the matters as the country eases closer to the 2024 general election.